Al Jazeera Podcasts.
Hey, YouTube. We're usually all about giving you something for the eyes and the ears, but today we're bringing you an audio-only episode. Today, a new chapter for Lebanon.
After 2 years of deadlock, Lebanon's parliament has elected a new president.
As the political deadlock breaks, who will determine Lebanon's future? I'm Malika Bilal, and this is The Take.
My name is Nader Durgham. I work in Beirut as a journalist with Middle East Eye for the most part, and other freelance outlets every now and then.
Well, Nader, welcome to The Take. More has happened in the past few days in Lebanon's politics than in the past 2 years. There's a new president, and now a new prime minister is coming into focus as well. So let's start with the moment when the wheels started turning. The election of Joseph Aoun. Tell me what happened when the announcement was made.
Yes, so lots of Lebanese people expressed a sense of hope after he gave his what they call khitab al-qasam, which is kind of his swearing-in speech. And he expressed lots of things that people are aspiring to see in Lebanon, including, people whose money were stolen or stuck in banks regaining their money, corrupt individuals facing justice. And one thing that he said that to some people felt like a challenge to Hezbollah, namely, he said that he wants to have the state be the only holder of weapons, only bearer of arms.
My pledge is to exercise my role as Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces and Chairman of the Supreme Defense Council, that I work through them to ensure that the right to carry arms is exclusive to the state.
So, to many people, this is a sign of hope. To Hezbollah and their supporters, it felt like a bit of a challenge, but at the same time, they didn't feel like it was a huge confrontation, because at the end of the day, Hezbollah was one of the political parties who voted for Aoun's presidency in the second round. So at the end, there was kind of a sense that a gap has been filled. Whether this is the great positive change Lebanon was waiting for or not, time will tell.
Okay, so lots to unpack there, and we will. But walk me through what actually happened that day in Parliament. What was it like? Because I know that cheers and clapping erupted after the announcement was finally made.
Yes, so just to explain very briefly, for the president to be elected in the first round, he needs to reach a two-thirds majority. If he doesn't get that, then it goes to a second round. So Joseph Aoun had the majority of votes, but not the two-thirds majority. So they went into the second round with a 2-hour delay, because what happened was that there was a meeting between him and Hezbollah and the Amal movement, where what is said is that a deal was made for them to essentially endorse him. According to Hezbollah, they did that to show that they are still a powerful king-making force, that they are technically one of the reasons why he was able to reach the presidency. In the second round, he got 99 votes out of 128, which is more than the two-thirds majority. And they did that because there was also a constitutional question regarding Joseph Aoun. He was the serving head of the army, right? And constitutionally, the president cannot be the serving head of the army. He must have resigned at least 2 years prior. To kind of cause a constitutional amendment, or to show that there is a big consensus for at least image purposes, it would have been good for him to get the two-thirds majority or more in the second round. And that is what happened. And that happened thanks to votes from Hezbollah and its ally Amal.
So he gets over this constitutional hurdle in the second round.
Yes, correct. In a way, he kind of got over it. And many people were endorsing him because he's, a statesman backed with good, positive relationships with Arab countries and the West. So to a lot of people, a lot of MPs in Lebanon, that is a positive step, a kind of reopening of the country to the world. And that is why you had lots of cheering and lots of joy in Parliament.
So what else do we need to know about Aoun? Would you say that he's a familiar face to the actual Lebanese people?
He is familiar, but not in the way one would expect. So, and by that, I mean that people don't really know much about his political positions. And that is something that he intentionally kept quite private. He said before in rare interviews that he wants to keep the army away from any political involvement whatsoever. And he has done that to the point that even when Hezbollah and Israel were fighting their war in Lebanon in the past few months, he kept the army mostly out of the conflict, even though Israeli airstrikes killed over 40 Lebanese soldiers. Aside from that, he became very popular early on in his career as army chief. So right after he was chosen as army chief in 2017, he was tasked with the difficult mission of kicking out the Islamic State forces and Jabhat al-Nusra, who had taken some positions in eastern Lebanon. He did so successfully and gained lots of prominence because of that. Anything else that's known about him was mostly after Lebanon entered its economic crisis, which directly affected the army. The army had reached a point where they announced that they were going on a vegan diet because they could not afford meat anymore.
Wow.
So Joseph Aoun made a big cry for help and a warning to political leaders in 2021, telling them, listen, the soldiers are going hungry just like the people. So what happened is that the US, who was already a huge financial contributor to the Lebanese army, stepped in and added more and more and more aid. Now, that is part of a US policy to kind of bolster a state institution here, the Lebanese army, to counter Hezbollah, whom Washington considers a terrorist organization. So that is why, in the eyes of Hezbollah and some supporters, he is kind of seen as a kind of US Western-backed man and a bit of a challenge. But so far from the Lebanese army's general relationship with Hezbollah, he might not be as confrontational with the group as some worry he will be.
Well, then I wonder if some of that confrontation might come from another source. Right before our interview, there was lots going on in the Lebanese parliament. Now we're looking at Nawaf Salam as the new prime minister. He's the head of the International Court of Justice. And President Aoun appointed him with the backing of more than half of the lawmakers in parliament. How does he factor into the political changes that are going on?
Well, it's kind of a continuation of what started last week with Joseph Aoun. So when Nawaf Salam got 85 votes, I believe, from parliament, which is a very big majority out of 128. And what we saw so far as statements coming from Hezbollah is that their MPs went to the meeting and spoke with Joseph Aoun and then told journalists that they were kind of disappointed with the latest developments and quite angry, accused some forces of trying to divide the country, trying to cancel out a certain force in favor of another. So it seems that there is a bit of a sense of disappointment from them because Nawaf Salam is also, to them, seen as backed by the West. He is, the president of the International Court of Justice. He recently was overseeing the genocide case in Gaza brought by South Africa against Israel, which also helped bolster his credibility in Lebanon, of course. But to these forces, Hezbollah wanted to support current Prime Minister Najib Mikati, or now former Prime Minister Najib Mikati. And they essentially did not go the way they were hoping it would, which is going to lead to some interesting developments in the days to come.
You say interesting developments like a true seasoned journalist who has been there and seen all. How sticky do you think things could actually get?
Well, in the past, Lebanese groups, I'm not just going to focus on Hezbollah here. Lebanese groups have also their opponents. So the March 14 coalition are mostly Hezbollah's opponents, while the March 8 are their allies.
March 14 was former Prime Minister Saad Hariri's bloc, which has the support of Saudi Arabia and the U.S. March 8 is the bloc that includes the Maronite Christian president Michel Aoun's party and Hezbollah. It has Syria and Iran support.
In the past, whenever, for example, March 14 would try to do something in government and March 8 wouldn't approve of it, they would block the government, and vice versa. Either group would send their supporters to the streets, cause mass protests, block certain reforms. And we've had governments or cabinets, to be more precise, resign or collapse because of these issues. Whether that's going to be the case now or not, we're not sure. But Lebanon is in a very particular position right now. We're in our 6th year since the economic collapse. State institutions are broke. People have really run out of patience and of money. And above all that, we just got out of a 2 months devastating war against Israel. People need, people, particularly Hezbollah's constituents, need money to rebuild. They need a sense of stability. And Israel is still occupying part of our lands in the south. People need to have faith that there is a government strong enough to impose Israel's withdrawal before the end of the 60-day ceasefire. So what might happen is that political groups might feel that they need to work together right now to at least get some institutional work ahead. Anything else on the long term, time will tell, unfortunately.
Well, Nader, I want to pick up on what you said about working together, because it took 13 tries for Lebanon's parliament to pick a leader, leaving the presidency vacant since former President Michel Aoun stepped down in October of 2022. And a note for our listeners, he has no relation to Joseph, even though they have the same last name. But 2 years is a really long time to go without a president. So why did it take so long?
So it took so long for the simple reason that the groups were really not agreeing. Lebanon's parliament is very deeply divided. No group really has a full majority of seats. So at the time, the March 14 coalition or the traditional opposition were proposing a name, Michel Mawad, which was seen as a bit too much of a provocation to March 8. Michel Mawad was not able to get the majority of the votes, and what we call the independent MPs, which are kind of MPs that were elected in 2022 out of the protest movement that started in 2019, did not support Mawad, for the most part at least. And so because of this back and forth, no one really got the majority. There were lots of names that were proposed. No one was really getting anywhere. Sometimes the quorum would not even be met, so the session would be canceled altogether. So eventually it was kind of put on hold when the war in Gaza started and its extension in Lebanon, when there were the border clashes and things like that. And obviously during the 2 months full-blown war on Lebanon, that was kind of an afterthought or a post-war thought. So when the war ended, it felt like there was a greater momentum, a very strong push, particularly according to reports from the US and from Saudi Arabia, to get Joseph Aoun elected. And Joseph Aoun in particular, because the army is the only Lebanese institution that enjoys broad trust across all sectors of Lebanese society. And in part because of its retained neutrality, right? And, because of Lebanon's sectarian-based power-sharing system, the president has to be a Maronite Christian, whereas the prime minister has to be a Sunni Muslim and the speaker of parliament has to be a Shia Muslim. This division also applies to all state institutions. That includes the army, where the head of the army has to be a Maronite Christian. Joseph Aoun just felt like the ideal pick, essentially, for that. He's the head of a neutral institution that enjoys trust from all sectors of Lebanese society. And the US like him. So they really, really wanted him to reach the presidency, whereas also other MPs saw him as an ideal figurehead.
All the pieces were in place.
Yeah.
So, Nader, Joseph Aoun is going to face many challenges. There is a fragile ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah, though fragile might be an understatement. And the clock is ticking on a 60-day deadline to carry it out. You also touched on that. Another issue is whether Hezbollah will lay down its arms. So, keeping in mind what he announced in his acceptance speech, what role can Aoun play on behalf of the Lebanese state?
So, lots of the analysis following Joseph Aoun's election was about whether, the reason why in the election of a president and now a prime minister was so accelerated was Hezbollah's weakening following its war with Israel. And that could be true. That could very well be true. Hezbollah's role militarily has definitely suffered heavy blows, though as we can tell now politically, it remains a strong Lebanese force. But Whether it would fully lay down its arms, I'm not entirely certain. That might lead to a bigger issue internally within Lebanon. So what some analysts predict is that what Joseph Aoun might do is basically make it clear to Hezbollah that he would protect their role politically, so as a political party, as a political entity in Lebanon, but he would not really provide them the state cover for their military role, for their role as a resistance group, which has been the case under Michel Aoun. Previously, for example, Michel Aoun was an ally of Hezbollah. That might make Hezbollah kind of change its calculations, reconsider some things. Whether it will fully surrender their arms, I cannot say for sure. No one knows really. But for now, what is certain is that the Lebanese army is spreading in the southern Lebanon below the Litani line, which was, according to the ceasefire, that's where the Lebanese army has to be dispatched. And the Israeli army is withdrawing slowly. But I mean, just recently, they fired at least 5 or 6 airstrikes north of the Litani River because they said that they had recognized some threats without providing evidence. But that's going to be a challenge for Joseph Aoun for sure. What will we do with Israel now in the last few days of the 60-day ceasefire? Israel has breached the ceasefire hundreds of times, according to the Lebanese government. And nothing has really been done to kind of force it to respect the agreement. Joseph Aoun is under a very, very difficult mission here. He also needs to gain trust from Southerners, from people from Eastern Lebanon, people who are most affected by the war, that there is a Lebanese state capable of protecting them. At the end of the day, Hezbollah and other groups rose to power because populations in the south felt like there was no one to protect them from Israel's regular attacks. If he is able of sending the message that through his political connections, through his military work, he's able to provide a safe space for Lebanese people, for Southerners, then he might be able to succeed.
But doesn't that sound contradictory in a way? Because he was the head of the military. So if he wasn't able to protect them as head of the military, what role can he play on behalf of the state now as president?
So basically, yes, that adds to the difficulty of his mission, right? The Lebanese army is supposed to take Hezbollah's place below the Litani River. And so far, it has been welcomed by Southerners, both Shia Muslim Southerners, Christian Southerners, etc. Because at the end of the day, they all respect the army. And there is kind of an understanding that, it is a state institution whose role is technically to protect them. Now, whether he will be able to actually do that, considering he kept the army neutral during the war, that is, a question that doesn't have an answer yet. But what we can see in his role as army chief is that he managed to keep the army from collapsing during the worst parts of the economic crisis. So the fact that he was able to keep that institution afloat despite all these struggles definitely is a reason why so many people feel optimistic.
Yeah, interesting. So Aoun has also said, it is time to invest in Lebanon through our foreign relations rather than betting on external powers to overpower one another. And there are many external powers. So there are some geopolitical divides that are being bridged here with this election. We know that Iran backs Hezbollah. We know the U.S. has also been playing a very active role in Lebanon, along with Saudi Arabia and Israel, each in their own way. And yet, all of them congratulated Aoun on his election. So connect the dots for me here. What do we need to know about the foreign hands that are clapping for Aoun?
Yes, so as you said, essentially, foreign powers have always played a very active role in Lebanese decision-making. They kind of exchange roles as different kingmakers, it being Iran, the US, Saudi Arabia, and for a while, Syria, Assad's Syria. And now, as you said, all of them have congratulated Joseph Aoun, and which is definitely an interesting development. What I think is happening right now is that obviously the US and Saudi Arabia are happy with his election as president. He's even going to Saudi Arabia as his first foreign trip. Iran, I believe, does not see him as a direct confrontation. I do not think he will be directly fighting Hezbollah or Iran's influence in Lebanon. There is definitely a sign of the waning influence Iran has over Lebanon, but it does not mean its role is completely over. And I do not think Joseph Aoun will completely kick it out, which is why Iran might not feel like it's completely threatened, not in the way it was in Syria, for example. As for Israel, it is true that their foreign minister congratulated Aoun on his election, but obviously Aoun did not answer. Lebanon and Israel do not have any formal relations and are officially under a state of war. However, on the point of foreign relations, not foreign groups fighting in Lebanon, that might mean that he's aspiring to have an era where Lebanon, has positive relations with countries across the region, it being in the Arab world or in Iran or in the West, without it essentially being a battlefield for different influences. For the longest time, Lebanon was seen as little more than an extension of the Saudi-Iranian proxy conflict. So with lots of people hoping that it would regain its sovereignty and just play its cards in the way that serves its interests, if that is what Joseph Aoun aspires to reach, then I'm sure he will find lots of popular support.
Well, finally, Nader, in many countries, this would be a moment of optimism. Political deadlock unlocked, relative newcomers on the scene, ceasefire after a war, financial situation seems likely to change. Are you optimistic?
I would say I'm interested. I think the best phrase that many people have been using right now is cautiously optimistic. We do not know what the future holds, but definitely, and I would say the reason for the cautious optimism is that no one seems to be enraged at these developments, right? Like, surely Hezbollah and Amal are not entirely happy about it, but they're not up in arms, There seems to be something for everyone here, and usually that's where things function best in Lebanon. But I definitely think that with the election of Joseph Aoun and Nawaf Salam, there is a new page that's being opened in Lebanon, a completely new era. And while we don't know what the future holds, some people just really wanted new faces. And Joseph Aoun and Nawaf Salam are completely new faces to them. And it could be something very good. It could also be bad, but people have a reason to feel hopeful, essentially.
And that's The Take. This episode was produced by Khaled, Soltan, and Ashish Malhotra, with Marcos Bartolomé, Hagir Saleh, and me, Malika Bilal. It was edited by Noor Wazwaz. Special thanks to David Enders. Our sound designer is Alex Roldan. Our video editors are Hisham Abu Salah and Mohannad Al-Melhem. Alexandra Locke is The Take's executive producer, and Ney Alvarez is Al Jazeera's head of audio. We'll be back tomorrow with guest host Kevin Hurden.